Hi guys, Olive here today to review 2 books on shopping malls. The first book I'll be discussing is called Meet Me by the Fountain, An Inside History of the Mall by Alexandra Lange. This book was published in 2022 by Bloomsbury, and the hardcover that I checked out from my local library comes in at 320 pages. As advertised, this book discusses the history of the modern shopping mall, from their inception in the 1950s all the way up to the versions that we see today. They've become such a ubiquitous part of 21st century life, it's really hard to imagine there was a time when they didn't sit in our suburbs. I mean, there had been different types of shopping centers that preceded the modern shopping mall, but those malls, the enclosed shopping centers with all different department stores and shops, the food court, and later additions like the arcade, we have an Austrian-born architect to thank for those. And it is the architecture of those early versions of the mall, the vision of that one architect, that leads the initial chapters of this work of nonfiction, which was fittingly written by an architecture critic and the author of 4 previous architecture-centered books. In those chapters, you will learn so much about the intended purpose of the early malls and how that went into the design of them. As we all know, though, just through inhabiting them and giving them meaning, buildings are so much more than just their construction. And being a part of that boom in consumerism in America following World War II, being places where people could gather and be seen, being places outside of work or the home where people could go to recreate, malls quickly became a part of the fabric of American life. So this book goes beyond the history, the design of the mall, and expands into more cultural territory. Things like depictions of malls in some of your favorite films, like teen movies, for instance, but then also more recent phenomena like mall walkers, or people who go to the mall in search of the exercise that it takes to walk around the mall. But toward the end of the book, the author looks more at malls of the present and also considers what malls of the future may look like. As you may know, you may have one of these in your town due to so many malls being built in their heyday, and then also as a result of the rise in online shopping, there are so many malls in the USA right now that have either died or are in the process of dying. Sometimes they are torn down. It is a mercy. They're torn down to make room for something else, but oftentimes they just sit vacant for long periods of time. Zombie malls, they're sometimes referred to. Content creators here on YouTube will do tours of the inside of said zombie malls, and those can be downright eerie. We do have a couple of zombie malls here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania as well. There is the infamous Century 3 Mall south of the city, which was open when I first moved here, but now they really need to do something about it. And then there's another zombie mall east of the city, but that zombie mall is actually still open because it's the Monroeville Mall where they shot the zombie film Dawn of the Dead. It was really cool to see it get a mention in this book, as well as some other famous malls that I know of, like Mall of America, of course, but then also King of Prussia Mall, which is on the east side of Pennsylvania. I think my very favorite part of this book, though, is at the very end when the author is envisioning what malls of the future could look like, how current malls could shift to better serve us, or the ones that are no longer operational, what they could be gutted and transformed into, or if they're going to be torn down, what we could use that real estate for. I really, really loved all of the ideas that she put forward, and I hope at least some of them end up coming to fruition. Those later cultural sections are absolutely fantastic. I really, really enjoyed those. But I would be remiss not to mention that they are so much different than the first 2/3 of this book, in which architecture definitely dominates. That makes sense. This author is an architecture critic. All of her other writing has been on architecture, so it makes sense that that's the focus of this book, more or less. And also, it's not as though it was uninteresting stuff, and the writing made it very accessible. But it's just not the most interesting topic to me personally, and I think anyone who's not super into architecture may have a similar experience as I did, where my eyes were glazing over at points because it just wasn't keeping my interest as much as those later sections would go on to do. I can't say I enjoyed this book, though. If you want to deep dive into the topic and learn more about shopping malls than you ever thought possible, this would be a good choice. But if you're looking for something more casual, perhaps a book that discusses malls in a more philosophical, contemplative way, you might want to consider the second book I'll be discussing, which is called Big Mall: Shopping for Meaning by Kate Black. This book was published in 2024 by Coach House Books, and the paperback copy that I also checked out from my local library comes in at 184 pages. This book is centered around the author's experience of growing up near the West Edmonton Mall in Canada, an enormous mall that has some controversial entertainment options. More on that later. But like is the case for many of us as we're growing up, the West Edmonton Mall played a huge part in this author's life during her adolescence. So in this collection of essays, what the author does is she takes a topic or a news story related to the West Edmonton Mall, and then she uses that to spark a larger discussion about malls in general. The collection starts out more abstract in nature, chewing on the concept of malls as physical places or as symbols. Then we get more specific, but then come the end of the collection, we loop back around to being more abstract, not unlike taking a lap around the mall. These essays take on topics like how malls are the perfect places for teenagers, hence why you tend to find a ton of teenagers in them, myself included when I was a teenager, but then also being places where you buy things. Malls as hubs of capitalism is a topic in here, as are those zombie malls that Meet Me by the Fountain brings up. There are essays in here that are more about the West Edmonton Mall than others. For example, there's one essay about how animals were kept in captivity there. I don't know about your mall growing up. My mall never did that. So obviously that wouldn't be a topic about every single mall, but it was really interesting reading about the ethics of that situation. Further, there's an essay where she talks about specific crimes that happened either in or around the West Edmonton Mall. And she uses that to talk about the safety of malls and more generally about the vulnerability of marginalized communities. At the core of this collection is the way this author feels about this one mall, the West Edmonton Mall, her mall for her when she was growing up. I think for a lot of us, we had that one mall that felt like our mall. And when you think back on it, it seems like such a simple thing. I would just go to the mall to hang out with my friends. But when you really start to dig into the topic, as this author does throughout the collection, you start to realize it's not as superficial as you initially think. There's so much that the mall represents to people, especially young people. They're the places where we go to hang out with our friends, the places where we go to pick out the clothing that's meant to represent us, the image that we portray to the world. There's just so much more to malls than you initially think. Reading this little book felt like the best kind of meandering, discussion-based college class. The kind where you come in and there is one topic on the agenda. And you just take that topic and you popcorn it around the room, going from person to person, getting everyone's perspective, really, really digging deep until there is no meat left on the bone of the topic. In that case, in those types of cases, the fun is in the thinking. And in this case, thinking about these really common spaces within North American life, but thinking about the meaning that they have in our lives, what they say about us, how we move through the world, and how we broadcast ourselves and who we are to other people. So yes, I would say that this is a brainy book, but not inaccessibly so. And I should also mention that there aren't exactly answers, concrete ones anyway, to the vast majority of the questions that are posed in this book, by this book, but that's not really the point. It's about the value to be had in the wondering. I have certainly found myself thinking about malls in a whole new way after reading both of these books. I've been thinking a lot about malls as hubs of social connection and how much of that we've lost as we've moved to online shopping. But of course, I've also been thinking about my mall from way back when. Going with my two closest friends, my flip phone in my pocket, heading straight to Gloria Jean's to get a sugar-filled iced coffee, then heading over to Hot Topic to look at the latest Good Charlotte t-shirts. Lots of nostalgia to be had in those thoughts, but I would say more than anything, these books made me want to go walk around a mall. To get my steps in, of course, but then also to feel that nostalgia, to people watch. and to see the mall with all new eyes with these 2 books under my belt. But those were my thoughts on these 2 very intriguing books about shopping malls. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions about either one of these books, I would love to hear that. Or alternatively, if you have a mall that either meant a lot to you back in the day or currently means a lot to you and you feel comfortable sharing that with me, I would love to hear from you in the comment section below. Let me know also if either one of these books made their way onto your TBR. I always love to hear that. If you want to get your hands on a copy of either or both, links for you will be down in the description box below to where you can do that. And at the very bottom of the exact same description box, you will also see links to everywhere you can find me around the internet, like Goodreads, Instagram, the Story Graph, all the places I'm the most active, in case you want to keep up with what I'm reading and doing right now. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.